Hello, I am Dr. Kaushim Kupadhyay, and today I will continue my discussion on pharmacotherapy of diabetes mellitus. Now, in the last class, we discussed the synthesis of insulin, release of insulin, different biological effects of insulin, and different insulin subtypes, the long acting insulin, short acting insulin, and ultra short acting insulin. Today, we are going to discuss a very important use of insulin, a complication of diabetes mellitus, especially type 1 diabetes mellitus, that is diabetic ketoacidosis. So let's start. Now diabetic ketoacidosis, it is mainly seen in type 1 diabetes mellitus, but can be seen in some few cases of type 2 diabetes mellitus also. Now why it is more common in type 1 diabetes mellitus? Because for diabetic ketoacidosis, that means the formation of ketone body, it requires almost absolutely absence of insulin or very low level of insulin, which is seen in type 1 diabetes mellitus. For type 2 diabetes mellitus, there is a major role of insulin resistance that we will discuss in the next class, but there is some amount of insulin is usually present in type 2 diabetes mellitus. But for type 1 diabetes mellitus, as the beta cell is destroyed, pancreatic beta cell, so there is a very the level of insulin is so low that it promotes ketosis, that is formation of ketone body. Now how it happens, the pathophysiology of diabetic ketoacidosis, let's look at this. But before, we very quickly recapitulate what we learned in the last class. So we know that when we have food, that is enough amount of glucose, amino acids and fatty acids are present in the blood after taking food. So the first priority for the body at that time is to increase level of insulin and decrease level of glucagon, so that the anabolic activity can take place. That means storage of in that glucose as glycogen in the liver and muscle, and other anabolic action on protein and lipid metabolism also, like more lipogenesis and more amount of protein is synthesized and stored. So basically anabolic function. So after taking food, there is increased level of insulin. You can see here that green arrow above, that means increased level, and red arrow in lower side, that means it is level is decreased. So after food, insulin glucagon, this ratio is very important in understanding of diabetic ketoacidosis. So in presence of food, insulin glucagon ratio is high, more insulin, less glucagon, so that will promote glucose utilization. You can see here glucose utilization in muscle, there will be more glycogen, and in adipose tissue there will be more fat deposition, that is lipogenesis. But lipolysis, proteolysis and glycogenolysis all will be lower. So you can see here the red triangle below means it is less. So insulin, increased insulin level, decreased lipolysis from adipose tissue, decreased proteolysis and decreased glycogen synthesis from liver and muscle. And this decreased lipolysis and proteolysis, along with it, it also decreases gluconeogenesis, because fatty acid is not synthesized from this adipose tissue, and also there is low protein breakdown product, that is amino acid. So ultimately gluconeogenesis is also inhibited in liver. So ultimately the euglycemia is maintained. That means after taking food, you have plenty of glucose in your blood, that is hyperglycemic state is reaching, and quickly insulin does its biological effects to maintain euglycemia. So I think until this it is very pretty clear, because in the last class we discussed this thing in very detail. All the enzymes that was involved we discussed in the last class. There is a very similar condition called hyperglycemic hyperosmolar state, or HHS. Previously it was called hyperosmolar hyperglycemic non-ketotic coma or HONC. The difference between HONC and DKA is that in case of HHS or HONC, there is very little or no ketone body formation. But in diabetic ketoacidosis, ketone body formation is one of the major characteristic feature. So let's look at how DKA develops. Now something triggered the formation of DKA in type 1 diabetes mellitus patients. The trigger may be an infection or myocardial infarction, pregnancy, or most of the cases poor compliance. So suppose a patient is on insulin and he is not taking it for 1 or 2 days, suppose. So it creates a very acute insulin deficient state. Finally, what happens? The altered insulin glucagon ratio will do these things. So exactly opposite from the last slide. So there will be very low glucose utilization, high amount of lipolysis because insulin inhibits the lipase enzyme. But in absence of insulin, there is absolute absence of insulin and presence of glucagon will promote lipase, and that's why lipolysis will occur in the adipose tissue. Proteolysis will occur. More and more protein will be broken down, and glycogen will be utilized from muscle. So there will be decreased glucose utilization. So ultimately the patient will have very high amount of glucose in his body because there is no shortage of food, and there is also presence of glycogenolysis. So in liver there will be glycogenolysis, so plenty of glucose is there in the blood. But in absence of insulin, the glucose cannot be utilized by muscle or adipose tissue or any other cell. So you remember that GLUT4 receptor is important for glucose transport inside the cell, and insulin promotes the translocation of GLUT4 receptor to the membrane that we discussed in the last class. So in absence of in absence of insulin, the glucose from blood cannot enter the tissue. So ultimately body thinks that there is glucose absence. So very important point, you try to think again. There is plenty of glucose is present, but body cannot understand that yes, I have glucose. What body thinks that I do not have glucose, so it actually tries to produce more glucose. So what it will do, more amount of glucose is not being utilized, so there is presence of hyperglycemia. Along with it, body thinks that I do not have glucose because my cell is not getting the glucose, so I need to produce more glucose. So that is why their glucagon is increased, and this glucagon and at very low level of insulin will promote glycogenolysis, and that will cause hyperglycemia. In the next step, there will be more and more fat breakdown, lipase activity. This lipase, you know that if a fat, the lipid is broken down, it produces triglyceride and free fatty acids. So these free fatty acids, from triglyceride there will be more and more free fatty acids will be there. These free fatty acids will go in the liver and it will be converted into glucose by gluconeogenesis. Similarly, the proteolysis, after proteolysis there will be high amount of amino acids in the liver, so that will also be converted into glucose by gluconeogenesis. So you can see there are multiple factors that leads to hyperglycemia. First, there is very limited glucose utilization, high amount of glycogenolysis, high amount of proteolysis, and more importantly lipolysis. All of them is going in the liver, and more gluconeogenesis that will cause hyperglycemia. Next step, this glucose must be filtered out of kidney, so glucosuria will occur, and glucosuria, more and more glucose will make the filtrate very osmotically active, and more diuresis will occur. So ultimately patient will suffer from dehydration. And this hyperglycemia and along with fluid loss with osmotic diuresis, both will contribute to make the plasma hyperosmolar. So there will be hyperosmolarity. So why hyperosmolarity is there? Because of high amount of glucose, and this high amount of glucose should be out of the body by osmotic diuresis, but it will not go alone. It will draw some water along with it. So that will make patient dehydrated. So dehydration will be occur. And other problem of diuresis is that there is loss of electrolytes also. So there will be loss of sodium, loss of potassium, magnesium and phosphate. So ultimately there will be fluid loss and there will be electrolyte loss. Fluid loss is the most important thing. And there is another problem that is special for decay, the ketone body formation in the liver, that will make ketoacidosis, because ketone body are acids. You know there are three kinds of ketone bodies: acetone, acetoacetate and beta hydroxybutyric acid. So all of them will ultimately create ketoacidosis. So let's look at how the ketoacidosis occurs. A very quick look at that. So usually what happens, that the pyruvate from different sources that goes inside the mitochondria, and it goes in the Krebs cycle, and ultimately ATP is produced. That is the usual phenomenon. And also fatty acids is broken down, it enters the mitochondria, and by beta oxidation it produces acetyl CoA, and this acetyl CoA and oxaloacetate both together, it goes in the Krebs cycle. That is citric acid cycle. You know that from biochemistry knowledge. And there is alternative pathway of acetyl CoA also. Acetyl CoA can be converted into ketone bodies. But in usual scenario, when there is insulin is available and insulin glucagon ratio is at normal level, the ketone body is not a very important pathway. So mostly it goes into the Krebs cycle. But what happens if there is absence of insulin? First, there will be high amount of lactate. Now think why this high amount of lactate is present. Because as the muscle cannot utilize glucose, there will be glycogenolysis, and this glycogenolysis will, and the protein breakdown will form lactate. So you know that the lactic acid is formed when there is a very less amount of glucose is available. Here glucose is available, but it is in the blood, not in the cell. So body thinks that I require energy, and that is why this lactate is produced. Lactate. And from there pyruvate goes inside, and the oxaloacetate usually it goes into Krebs cycle, but in absence of insulin it goes into gluconeogenesis pathway. So there is high amount of oxaloacetate is converted into this cycle in absence of this cycle. This cycle requires insulin, but in absence of insulin and in presence of high glucagon, it goes in this way. So more and more glucose is produced and hyperglycemia occurs, that we discussed in the last slide. But what happens for the fatty acids? Fatty acids is also increased high amount of free fatty acids, because there is lipolysis going on in absence of insulin. Very small amount of insulin can prevent lipolysis in adipose tissue. But in acute deficiency of insulin, as in case of decay patients, will produce high amount of fatty acids, free fatty acids, that goes in the liver, and ultimately it will go inside the mitochondria. Now it can form this triacylglycerol again, TG, but this requires insulin. Again this requires insulin and do not have insulin. So ultimately it goes in this pathway. The entry of fatty acid in the mitochondria requires an important enzyme called carnitine. So this carnitine is again increased in presence of high glucagon. So the more amount of carnitine will redirect the fatty acid into the beta oxidation. Now beta oxidation means very high amount of acetyl CoA will also be produced. This acetyl CoA cannot enter the Krebs cycle. So what will happen? This acetyl CoA will form ketone bodies. So you know acid to acetyl CoA to acetyl CoA converted into acid to acetyl CoA. So that is ultimately converted into acetoacetate and acetone. So this is the thing, the ketone body, the ketosis. So now you understand why ketone body formation occurs in diabetic ketoacidosis patient, because in absence of insulin and high amount of glucagon, the oxaloacetate is goes into the gluconeogenesis pathway, and ketone body is formed from the very high amount of acetyl CoA, because there is also high amount of fatty acid. So basically this is a misinterpretation of body about the whole thing. There is presence of glucose, but body cannot utilize it. So ultimately that is why everything is happening. So ketoacidosis. Now ketone body is an acid. So you can understand, if there is high amount of ketone body, what will happen? pH will be low. So there is more H plus concentration, so low pH, that is acidosis. And whenever body has a very beautiful mechanism to compensate any change of pH. So if there is high amount of H plus is present, that means low pH, there is a buffer system. The most important buffer system is bicarbonate buffer. There are some other buffer system also like phosphate, but most important is bicarbonate buffer system. So what happens, more and more bicarbonate will come and bind with this H plus, and ultimately it will convert it into carbon dioxide, because H plus will bind with HCO3 minus, and finally it will make H2O plus CO2. So the carbon dioxide will be formed. But this carbon dioxide, what will happen? This carbon dioxide is increased. So you can see the green mark, carbon dioxide is increased, and that will be expirated via lung. So lung will try to get rid of this carbon dioxide. So if you have more carbon dioxide inside your body, lung will try to ventilate again and again, so there will be hyperventilation. So hyperventilation will occur, and there will be loss of carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide will not get lost only. Remember, with each expiration, we lose some amount of water also. So if a patient is hyperventilating, that means he is also losing fluid. So there is again, it contributes to dehydration. So ketoacidosis, high amount of H plus, and the bicarbonate buffer will come, and this carbon dioxide will be formed, and that will be expirated out of the body, and hyperventilation will occur. Another fate of high H plus concentration, if there are multiple mechanisms, I just told you. So one important mechanism is that this H plus will get inside the cell in exchange of potassium. To maintain the electrical neutrality, potassium will come out of cell. So the H plus will go inside, and it will be buffered by intracellular buffers. But H plus cannot enter for free. Cell has to give something back to the body. So it gives back potassium. So there is high amount of potassium level in the blood. So hyperkalemia. So in the initial phase of diabetic ketoacidosis, there is hyperkalemia. But as soon as you start treatment with insulin, this insulin, you know that insulin favors the potassium entry into the cell. So as soon as there will be insulin therapy, the cell will again take back its potassium, and then there will be severe hypokalemia. So to start with, the actual pathophysiology of diabetic ketoacidosis, patients will come with high potassium level, but as soon as you start treatment with insulin, their potassium level will very quickly fall. Now the patient can suffer from hypokalemia. So the patient can go to cardiac arrhythmia due to hyperkalemia initially, and then you start very enthusiastically, you start insulin therapy. Now patient become hypokalemic, and again patient can die of arrhythmia. So the potassium level is very important for the management of diabetic ketoacidosis. You have to remember three things in your mind. First is dehydration, second is glucose level, third is potassium level. This is the most important three things. Okay, now let's look at the symptoms. Now I think you understood the pathophysiology. If you do not understood, please see the thing again. You can go back and see this part again. So now you look at what are the different symptoms. First is ketone body. If the ketone body, you know that ketone body, one of the most important ketone body is acetone. This acetone has a very sweet fruity odor. So if a patient has come with diabetic ketoacidosis with a very high level of ketone body and he is also hyperventilating, so along with the ventilation, with the expiration, some amount of acetone is also released, and this acetone you can as a clinician you can get the odor of a fruity smell. So a patient has come to you unconscious, a known type 1 diabetes mellitus patient, or sometimes maybe unknown. You get this acetone breath and quickly you can diagnose, yes, this patient may be suffering from diabetic ketoacidosis. So this is one important symptom. Sorry, this is called sign. You can call it sign because you have to catch it. Next is vomiting. High amount of ketone body will stimulate the vomiting center and patient will vomit, and this vomiting will again lead to dehydration because it will again fluid loss. So you can see there are multiple factors that contributes to dehydration. So that is why the patient comes with you a very dehydrated state, and this is the most important problem. So people, usually the common conception is that for diabetic ketoacidosis I have to give insulin, and as there is very high amount of blood glucose level, I have to minimize it to the at least normal level. But the most important thing for a diabetic ketoacidosis patient is dehydration. Hyperglycemia is important, of course, but dehydration is more important because the hyperglycemia is causing osmotic diuresis, patient is losing blood. The bicarbonate buffer system is causing hyperventilation, again patient is losing fluid, and vomiting, also patient is losing fluid. So ultimately dehydration and hyperosmolarity. More dehydration means patient become more hyperosmolar. And yes, osmotic diuresis means you get symptoms like polyuria and polydipsia. And this is a special thing for another special sign in case of DKA, this Kussmaul breathing. So this is a special kind of breathing pattern where the patient has tachypnea as well as it is deep breath also. It is not shallow. So deep breath along with tachypnea and fruity odor, that will give you the instant diagnosis of diabetic ketoacidosis. Now I think from this very important slide you understand what happens in the patients of DKA. Now if you understand this slide, then you will very easily understand how you need to fix it. But before going to fix itself, let's look at the symptoms. So this is a table from Harrison. So you can see symptom: nausea, vomiting, thirst and polyuria. I have already told you the mechanism of all these symptoms. And abdominal pain. Yes, sometimes the dehydration and abdominal pain. So you can think about pancreatitis also. The patient sometimes come with pancreatitis with almost similar feature. Hyperglycemia will also be there. So you have to think about that. But yes, for pancreatitis patients, you do not have symptoms like Kussmaul breathing and acetone breath. So that is the thing you have to keep in mind. Precipitating events: inadequate insulin administration, infection, infarction, drugs, pregnancy. So these are the trigger. In the last slide I called trigger something. So in type 1 diabetes mellitus patient, some trigger happens and this patient comes up with decay. Many times what happens, you do not know, there is no prior history of type 1 diabetes also. Patient comes with acetone breath and this unconsciousness, and then the type 1 diabetes is diagnosed. So it is not that you will always get this clue that the patient is of type 1 diabetes mellitus. Sometimes this may be the first symptom of type 1 diabetes mellitus. So patient comes with decay, and on that spot he is diagnosed a case of type 1 diabetes mellitus. So it may be other way around also. So this, please keep this thing in mind also. Now physical finding, tachycardia, because patient is losing so much fluid. So of course there will be hypotension and tachycardia, dehydration and hypotension, tachypnea, abdominal tenderness, and lethargy. And if he is not treated very quickly, it can go into coma also. So it is a very severe emergency condition. So you can see polyuria, abdominal pain, nausea, vomiting, Kussmaul respiration, and altered mental status, and acetone breath. So along with hyperglycemia and tachycardia. This picture will give you a very important clue about patients of diabetic ketoacidosis. So this is a very quick and easy illustration of how you remember that Kussmaul breathing. So you can say this is a normal respiration with normal depth. And what you can call it? You can call it tachypnea, because normal, there is increased respiratory rate. You can see the more and more respiration is going on, but the depth is not increased. But here depth is increased, but rate is almost similar. So deep inspiration only, deep inspiration and expiration. But in case of Kussmaul breathing, this is the Kussmaul breathing. So there is rapid as well as deep inspiration and expiration. So remember that this is Kussmaul breathing. Now laboratory values of diabetic ketoacidosis. So what you can expect? You can expect a very high glucose level, hyperglycemia. You can expect plasma ketone body level, so plasma ketone plus, and arterial pH 6.8 to 7.3. So the normal level of pH, you get lower than that. So it might get as low as 6.8 also. If it is less than 7, it is very severe acidosis. Okay, so that's and you have to replace bicarbonate in that case. Okay, so so this is the main features, this arrow, and these are the features you can get also. So potassium normal to increase. Remember, this is before treatment. Why this happens? Because the H plus ion is going inside and potassium is going outside of cell. So that is why you can get normal to increase potassium. You can get low bicarbonate, very important. Low bicarbonate, why? Because bicarbonate is being utilized to neutralize the H plus due to ketone body formation. And anion gap. Anion gap is a type of, there are two kind of acidosis, with high anion gap and with normal anion gap. Now this is a high anion gap. High anion gap means there is some other acids are present. Here ketoacids are present, so that is why we gave some anion gap. You can get a very good idea of anion gap from any lecture from about this thing. We cannot discuss about anion gap because of short time duration. You can read it from elsewhere, or you can see any other YouTube video. So we may be discuss in some later classes, but for today you just remember there is high anion gap acidosis. So ultimately these black ones or the darker ones are most important. That is glucose, high level of glucose about 250 to 600. Plasma ketone body will be there, and arterial pH will be less because there is acidosis. And to counteract this acidosis, there will be low bicarbonate and high potassium. Okay. Now a very quick look at the HHS, that is hyperglycemic hyperosmolar state. That there is plenty to common things about these two, but there are most important thing that is missing is absence of ketone body. So ketone body here, very high level of ketone body, you can see 4+, it's plus or minus, that means it is almost normal. So ketosis is not there because insulin deficiency is not that much. So for the slight amount of insulin that is present in patient of HHS, that is enough to prevent the lipolysis and ketosis. So that is why ketone body formation is not a problem here. But the problem is the level of hyperglycemia is much more here. So basically HHS present is patients are mostly type 2 diabetic mellitus patient, and what they tends to do, they have it. It is not a very acute condition. You can get a patient in acute condition, but the build-up is relatively insidious in nature. So you can the hyperglycemic state is being formed for about 1 week or 2 week or more. So it is gradual increase of high the blood glucose level. So and the osmolarity is more than what we found in DK. So you can see the range is 300 to 320, but here the range is 330 to 380. So it is more hyperosmolar, it is more hyperglycemic, and there is creatinine function, that is creatinine level is increased. That means we get pre-renal azotemia. We can call it pre-renal azotemia. That means the kidney function also deteriorates in this case of HHS. But there is normal pH. You can see pH is more than 7.3. So there is plenty of common. The common things are high glucose level and insulin deficiency, both is and high osmolarity. These things are common, but the uncommon is there is ketone body formation is not there, creatinine may be increased, and also the hyperglycemia is more. So the main problem in this HHS is the hyperglycemic hyperosmolar state, and the main problem in DK is this ketosis. Okay, so if we take it, so main problem here is this one and this one, and the important point is here this and this, and to some extent this. Okay, treatment is similar for both the cases. So let's move on to treatment. But now diabetic ketoacidosis. Now what we discussed until now, I think you have already a feeling that the most important thing we need to fix is the fluid deficit, because there are many arrows which was converted into the dehydration. So the most important thing is we have to fix this fluid deficit. Next thing we have to do is to fix the glucose, the hyperglycemic state, by insulin. Another important point is the potassium level, but because initially it is normal to hyperkalemic state, but as the insulin treatment starts, patients goes towards hypokalemic state. Next thing we need to manage is the bicarbonate level, because due to ketoacidosis the bicarbonate buffer is being used, so their patient may be suffering from low bicarbonate level. And there are some other problems like loss of other electrolytes, mostly phosphate and magnesium. But this thing is not present for every patient. If there is severe loss of magnesium and phosphorus, then you may require to supplement this. But for the most of the patients, this first three usually most important. For patients with high acidosis, that is pH level less than 7, you have to give bicarbonate supplementation. And of course, last but not the least, you have to treat the trigger. That means if the patient is suffering from any other infection that might have caused this decay, you have to fix that. If the patient is suffering from myocardial infarction, you have to treat that. And if the patient is suffering due to simply poor compliance, that he has taken his food but he did not have insulin, so for that purpose you have to counsel the patient so that this should not be repeated in the future. Now the glucose target is you have to keep the glucose around 150 to 200 milligram per dl level. You have to keep the potassium more than 3.5 milliequivalent per liter, and you have to give bicarbonate in such a dose that pH becomes above 7 at least. So these are our treatment goals. and we have to give adequate fluid. So now let's look at a therapeutic problem. Now this therapeutic problem is part of your syllabus maybe, and this particular question or similar question can come. So let's look at the problem and we will learn how to manage this case. So a 20-year-old diabetic man on insulin therapy suddenly developed fever and missed his usual dose of insulin and become unconscious. So there are some clue that probably the person is suffering from type 1 diabetes mellitus because age is relatively less and he is on insulin therapy. But remember that type 2 diabetes mellitus can also present in such young age like 20 years, and type 2 diabetes mellitus patient also can be given insulin for therapy. So there is no definitive clue here, but it is more likely that patient is suffering from type 1 diabetes mellitus. Now the second clue, he developed fever, that means there is some trigger is there, and missed his usual doses of insulin also. So both of them together makes the patient a very important candidate of diabetic ketoacidosis, and now he has become unconscious. So this is a big clue that the patient is suffering from diabetic ketoacidosis. So what measures will you take to manage this condition? So let's jump onto the treatment. So presenting features, suddenly develop fever with unconscious. So this thing we discussed already. Inference, he is probably suffering from diabetic ketoacidosis and he needs prompt treatment. So you have to admit the patient. Okay, you have to admit the patient and you quickly do an IV catheterization and you send blood for glucose, electrolytes, ketone body, and you do an ABG, that is blood gas analysis, and you have to monitor the blood pressure, pulse, respiration as usual. Now for definitive treatment, we have to give fluid. That is the first and foremost, most important. So this regime is according to Harrison 20th edition. So you have to give a very large amount of fluid, 2 to 3 liter of normal saline within first 1 to 3 hours. Subsequently 0.44, that is half normal saline at 200 to 500 milliliter per hour. And after some time, so when you are giving this in 1 to 3 hour and within this time you will also give insulin. So this insulin will decrease the blood glucose level. So you have to give the glucose in latter part of your treatment. So you have to change the 8 to 5% glucose and 0.45% saline at 150 to 250 ml per hour when plasma glucose reaches 250 milligram per dl. So basically you start therapy with this regime, 2 to 3 liter normal saline. Then you go back to half normal saline after that. And when with the insulin therapy, you reach the target of 200 to 250 milligram per dl, you need to add 5% glucose with already half normal saline that you are given. So you need to give some amount of glucose also in the latter part of treatment to stabilize the glucose level. Now regular insulin. Now regular insulin and at 100 unit per ml at that concentration you can give intravenous. This is the only intravenous preparation you can give. Otherwise every other kind of insulin, that is ultra short acting, long acting, and also the 500 unit per ml regular insulin also, these are all for subcutaneous infection. So only regular insulin at 100 unit per ml concentration you can give intravenous, and as this patient is an emergency you have to give intravenous. So intravenous regular insulin you start. What will be the dose? 0.1 unit per kg per hour. So suppose patient is weighing 50 kg, then you have to give 5 unit. 50 into 0.1, that is 5 unit per hour by continuous IV infusion. If there is no response, you can gradually increase the dose up to 0.2 to 0.3 unit per kg. But you will wait for 2 to 4 hours before escalating the dose. So that is the regular insulin dose, and you will check for the plasma glucose. You have to maintain constant check on plasma glucose until it reaches 200 to 250. You should not ever do a very aggressive treatment with insulin. Suppose you think that a patient has come with 800 milligram per dl glucose concentration and he is unconscious. I should give about 0.5 unit per kg and I will aggressively treat the patient and I will reach my target very quickly. If you think like that, you may kill the patient, because this rapid correction of glucose, and also there will be a sudden hypokalemia, because this insulin, the high amount of insulin, will promote the potassium entry inside the cell. So cell will take back its potassium that it had given during the pathophysiology in exchange of H plus. So it will take back its potassium and patient will suddenly become hypokalemic and he will die of arrhythmia. So never ever do a very aggressive insulin therapy. Okay. Next is potassium phosphate. If the patient is hyperkalemic, because initially there may be hyperkalemia, if the patient is hyperkalemic, that is more than 5.2 milliequivalent per liter potassium concentration, you do not need to give in potassium supplementation at that time, but you have to keep an eye on potassium level. If when it becomes, after you start insulin therapy, the level will gradually become lower. So when it reaches at that level, that more than 3.5 but less than 5 or less than 5.2, so 3.5 to 5, this level, that is the normal level, you can give 10 milliequivalent per hour potassium supplementation. If the patient becomes hypokalemic, that is less than 3.5, then 4 to 80 milliequivalent per hour. So at a glance, if a patient is hyperkalemic, you do not give potassium, you just wait the potassium to come back at its normal level. When it comes in its normal level, that is 3.5 to 5.2, you give 10 milliequivalent per hour potassium. But if the patient becomes hypokalemic due to continuous insulin therapy, you then go to more aggressive potassium supplementation, that is 40 to 80 milliequivalent per hour potassium supplementation. So basically you need to titrate your therapy. If there is, bicarbonate is usually not routinely given. If there is severe acidosis, that is pH less than 7, then you have to supplement sodium bicarbonate 50 millimole per liter in 200 ml of sterile water until the pH is 7. If the pH is more than 7, then you have to stop the bicarbonate supplementation. You do not need that. Again, proper antibiotic to treat the control the infection. So that is the cause. You may require also phosphate or magnesium supplementation, that is not written here. So you may require you may require phosphate or magnesium supplementation if patient is having deficiency. So that, please keep that thing also in mind. Next, you have to continue the treatment until the patient is stable and glucose goal is 150 to 250 milligram per dl. Again, you do not have to reach the 110 or 120 milligram. Just keep it inside this margin 150 to 250 and wait for the patient to become symptomatically stable and hemodynamically stable. When the patient becomes stable, you can decrease the insulin infusion to 0.05 to 0.1 unit per kg per hour. And after some time, if the patient is stable for quite a time, then you start his usual insulin therapy, that is long acting insulin subcutaneously. As soon as patient starts his normal eating, then you can go to the usual basal bolus therapy, that is you give a basal insulin subcutaneously and along with some short acting bolus insulin. So you can go back to that regime. but only after the patient is hemodynamically clinically stable. So this was all about diabetic ketoacidosis. So today I will end this my session here. In the next day we will start oral antidiabetic drugs. Thank you for your patience hearing. Goodbye. I will see you in the next class.